Welcome to the Healthy Skin Show with Jennifer Fugo, where we're flipping everything you've been told about your chronic skin issues upside down and connecting you with alternative solutions your dermatologist never told you about.
Welcome back to episode 233 of the Healthy Skin Show. In today's episode, I'm dishing on gluten and why I ask clients to go gluten-free. You might think that my recommendation of a gluten-free diet is somehow suggesting that gluten could potentially be at least partly responsible for your eczema, psoriasis, or whatever type of rash you have going on. But the truth is that I make the suggestion regardless of whether I suspect gluten as a food trigger. In fact, many of my clients note that removing gluten didn't help their rashes at all. Basically, they saw no change or improvement in their skin. So then why on earth do I recommend to clients or anyone who is going through this process of rebuilding healthy skin to avoid gluten? Well, that's not exactly a straightforward answer. I want to dive into the research to explain to you why I find it helpful from a clinical perspective that you probably haven't considered yet. Certain skin issues seem to have some potential connection to gluten, and admittedly, I think it's worthwhile to keep the following in mind before we dive in a little bit deeper. In some instances, eczema patches could be the result of gluten consumption, as was the case of my cheek eczema over 10 years ago, as well as those who may not know that they have a sensitivity to gluten or even have the skin manifestation of celiac disease called dermatitis herpetiformis. With psoriasis, research is still currently being done to better understand this interesting relationship with gluten. Generally, there appears to be some benefit for those with psoriasis who have either a sensitivity to gluten or celiac disease, but not everyone will benefit and see an improvement to their symptoms simply by going gluten-free. Rosacea, on the other hand, has an interesting potential connection with gluten in that research points toward potentially shared HLA genes associated with celiac disease. One study found that women with rosacea had, quote, twice the odds of having type 1 diabetes, celiac disease, multiple sclerosis, or rheumatoid arthritis, end quote. And while much of the research out there seems to associate skin issues with celiac, it's been my clinical experience that not everyone who struggles eating gluten has celiac disease. Some, like myself, are sensitized to the protein and seem to react to it in their body's own unique way. Now, sharing this doesn't mean that gluten is inherently bad for you, but it does highlight an ongoing field of research that hopefully will have more definitive answers in the coming years. For now, this is simply a potential piece of the puzzle for some. While it is possible that your body could potentially react to the gluten protein, this isn't my driving concern with clients. I'm more concerned about a very specific problem that gluten creates for your gut. We know, thanks to ongoing research by celiac pioneers such as Dr. Alessio Fasano, that gluten actually increases gut permeability, also known as leakiness, within the gut. This occurs in every single person, no matter who consumes it, even in those who are not sensitive to it. That single fact alone is significant in my experience and in that of my colleagues, as gut microbiome dysbiosis is quite often present in cases of chronic skin issues, especially when diet alterations didn't create lasting improvements or any improvement at all. It's why I don't believe that food and diet are all that matters here, because some problems are not really food fixable, and sometimes really quote-unquote healthy diet changes can actually make skin issues worse, as I have shared on this show repeatedly. This is when we need to look deeper into what's driving the physical complaints rather than just cutting out more and more and more foods. And often this points toward an underlying gut microbiome issue, even surprisingly in cases without any gut symptoms whatsoever. When there is serious gut dysfunction and microbiome issues, thanks to organisms that create digestive and absorptive challenges, in addition to triggering more inflammatory cytokines, increasing how permeable or leaky your gut wall is not a good idea. Okay, let's say that again. Increasing how leaky your gut is not a good idea. I feel like we can all get behind that concept. So the last thing your poor body needs is to be flooded with even more inflammatory waste products from what's in the gut, as well as partially undigested food proteins and even parts of organisms in the GI tract. So while gluten could be a food trigger for some like myself, its role of increasing the permeability of your gut wall is actually more concerning. Clients who haven't ever seen any changes from removing gluten often ask me, after a few weeks, if they can go back to eating gluten. And my answer is always no. They often think that the request was based purely on taking out a potential food trigger for the rashes, but my reason has to do with reducing as much leakiness throughout the GI tract as we work on the imbalances that are there. I want to do my best to contain the inflammatory things floating around as much as possible, and removing gluten can be helpful in that effort. If you decide on your journey to remove gluten, you might be wondering if you have to avoid it for life to keep your rashes at bay. While I don't have a clear-cut answer for you, it is possible that you could, again, eat gluten without any issues, assuming you don't have celiac disease. As things stabilize with time and work, some clients are able to add gluten back into their diet to varying degrees. Some may tolerate wheat and other sources of gluten just fine, while others might be able to tolerate some more ancient forms of wheat like kamut, spelt, or einkorn. And some might only be able to tolerate fermented products like sourdough, while others, like myself, discover that gluten just isn't their friend. Everyone is different, and I hold space for wherever someone's journey and personal decisions about their health guide them. But in the meantime, I firmly feel that removing gluten is worthwhile while working on your root causes of chronic skin problems. So if you've previously thought that the only reason to remove gluten was in the event that it was a diet trigger, unfortunately, that's short-sighted. Even if it's not a dietary trigger, its power to increase gut permeability and expose your body to an increased burden of inflammatory things floating around the GI tract is actually an even better reason to avoid it. As you work on the GI tract and bring the microbiome back into balance, you may be able to reintroduce gluten as your tolerance to maintain a sealed gut improves. I hope this provides you a different perspective on the challenges that gluten presents to your case, so that you can make an informed decision about whether to continue to eat gluten or avoid it on your journey. Now, if you've got any questions or thoughts you'd love to share, or you want to see the research that I put together for you, head on over to skinterrupt.com/233 so we can keep the conversation going. And if you know someone who's considering removing gluten but is unsure about whether they should remove it or they should stay gluten-free, this would be a great episode to share with them. Then take a moment to rate and review the Healthy Skin Show on your podcast platform. Hit the subscribe button so you can tune in each week for new research, tips, and inspiration. And then let's connect over on Instagram. I'm at Jennifer Fugo. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.